U.S. Navy says that the Ocean Gate submersible imploded en route to the Titanic wreck.
Authorities say 5 passengers died, including the company's CEO. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. BIR investigates manipulations in the 2022 income tax returns. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. greenlights next year's national budget. Ukraine collects 60 billion euro foreign financial support. U.S. President Joe Biden expects to cross paths with China's Xi Jinping sooner. And Victor Wembanyama joins the Spurs for this year's NBA draft. DICT Cybercrime Investigation Coordination Center intensifies its war against cybercriminals in the country. Vin Pascua has the report.
DICT Undersecretary Alexander Ramos says that the agency's cybercrime fighting capabilities are strengthened. This is after the agency established its 200 gigabyte bandwidth internet connection. Japanese internet provider Infinivan Cooperatives under the leadership of Mr. Shigeki Nakahara helps the agency with the internet connection speed up. According to the undersecretary, the said expanded bandwidth will hasten the tracking operation against cyber criminals under the Republic Act 10175 or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. Ramos adds that Infinivan's partnership is granted by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Japan, which is aimed at further strengthening online technology in the country via e-digitalized government transactions. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Bureau of Internal Revenue, or BIR, investigates the 2022 income tax returns, seeking business owners engaged in tax manipulation. They also filed criminal charges against buyers of fake receipts. Ayla Dabu has the details.
The Bureau of Internal Revenue, or BIR, is working intensively to reach this year's target collection of 2.6 trillion pesos. BIR Commissioner Romeo D. Lumagi Jr. instructed regional directors across the country to issue letters of authority, or LAS, to individual and business taxpayers. Lumagi emphasizes that the focus will be on income, value added, and withholding taxes filed in 2022 and from previous years. On Wednesday, BIR filed criminal cases against corporate officers, accounting firms, and accountants allegedly purchasing ghost receipts that lead to a tax liability of 17.9 billion pesos. Lumagi declared that every individual implicated would face the full force of the BIR. Ayla Dabu reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Monetary Board, or MB, maintains key interest rates at 6.25% due to a slowdown in inflation. Rate hikes were paused after inflation declined from its peak of 8.7% in January, the highest in 14 years. The government revealed a further slowdown, with consumer price growth dropping to 6.1% in May. Core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy prices, also decreased from 7.9 to 7.7%. MB Chair and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP Governor Felipe Medalla, announced that their revised projection for average inflation in 2023 is 5.5%. The forecast for 2024 has slightly decreased to 2.8 from 3.1%. Dominic Velasquez, the chief economist of China Banking Corporation, said the trajectory of inflation suggests that it could reach the BSP's target range of 2.4 or 2 to 4% by the fourth quarter. She pointed out that the U.S. Federal Reserve might continue raising interest rates, which may necessitate the Monetary Board to increase rates to prevent capital flight.
The Department of Labor and Employment say employees who will report to work on June 28 are entitled to receive double pay. DOLE releases Labor Advisory 14 series of 2023 that presents the proposed computation of workers' wages for the declared regular holiday next week. Employees who will render overtime work shall be paid an additional 30% of the hourly rate. The advisory adds that employees who will work on the set date that also falls on their rest days shall be paid an additional basic wage of 200%.
The Marcos administration is pushing a plan to tax junk food and increase the imposts on beverage items. Eden Santos reports.
Finance Secretary Benjamin Jokno says his agency and the Department of Health are proposing tax measures on junk foods and levies on higher sweetened drinks in the country. The raised taxes were made to address health issues among Filipino children and generate revenue. According to Jokno, the proposal mandates a tax of 10 pesos per 100 grams or 10 pesos per 100 millimeters on repackaged food products that lacked nutritional value. Jokno adds that the tax rate would be adjusted according to the annual inflation rate. He notes that the proposed tax measure aims to generate 76 billion pesos annually. Department of Finance data shows that between 2018 and 2022, tax collections on sweetened drinks lie at 213.5 billion pesos. Meanwhile, DOH reaffirms its support for the tax measures as it would support bankrolling health programs and services, including the Universal Health Care Act. Eden Santos reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, reports an increase in price for some essential products in the first half of June. Rice, milkfish or bangus, native garlic, and red sugar experience price hikes at average retail price level. The agency records an increase of 7 centavos to 1 peso for the retail price of regular milled rice across 8 trading centers. Milkfish or bangus range from 5 centavos to 25 pesos per kilogram. However, its retail price decreased by 89 cents in Metro Manila and down 25 pesos in Cebu City. Native garlic ranged from 10 to 30 pesos per kilogram increase, down 10.44 pesos in NCR. The price of red sugar also rose with an increase of 25 centavos to 6.13 pesos per kilogram in 6 trading centers. There were also decreases in average retail prices. Decrease in price per kilogram of dressed chicken ranging from 2.50 to 20 pesos, while banana lakatan went down by 2.08 to 15 pesos in 6 trading centers.
The Department of Public Works and Highways settles to its 125th milestone anniversary. JD Mahinay tells us more.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. praises the endeavors of the Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH, for its historic accomplishments in infrastructure development. The President urges the agency to remain firm in its mandate of building robust infrastructure development for the country, anchored in the administration's 8-point socio-economic agenda.
In line with this, I urge you to continue streamlining your procedures, preventing delays and costs and overruns, and enforcing transparency measures in all government projects and transactions.
The President challenges the agency to go beyond physical infrastructure, by implementing the concept of inclusive and accessible design. He asserts the need to acknowledge the needs of all individuals like challenged pregnant women, the elderly, and the young. DPWH was established on June 23, 1898, holding flagship projects that show the government's capacity while displaying the Filipino culture and identity. JD Mahinay reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. greenlights 5.768 trillion national budget for next year. According to the Development Budget Coordination Committee, the said outlay is 5.5% bigger than this year's expenditures. The committee adds that the 2024 budget aims to promote economic transformation and recovery from the pandemic. Department of Budget and Management says that the proposed national budget includes the priorities and policy directions of the Marcos administration under the Philippine Development Plan 2028 and the 8-point socio-economic agenda. Coming up, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol visits President Vo Van Thuong in Hanoi. The European Union to hold crisis talks with Serbia and Kosovo. And U.S. President Biden expects to meet Chinese President Xi in the near term. Stay tuned, Mata ng Agila International will return for more global news.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart.
Simula ngayong Lunes, ang Kada Umaga, 10 a.m. na! Sina Emma, Diana, at Tia! Kami ang inyong Girl Kada! Handa na magbigay ng mas maraming impormasyon, advice, inspirasyon, at saya! Kada umaga ngayong Lunes, 10 a.m. sa Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's net together sa Net 25.
Manila, this is Bruno Mars. I'll be performing at the Philippine Arena June 24th and June 25th. Go get your tickets at livenation.ph. I'll see y'all soon.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Opposition leader Ousmane Sonko has lodged a legal action case in France against Senegalese President Macky Sall, accusing him of crimes against humanity. Sonko's lawyer, Juan Branco, revealed the accusations during a press conference.
Nous avons mené ce dernier mois une longue enquête avec la participation de centaines de Sénégalais que je tiens ici à remercier. Des citoyens, des fonctionnaires, des gens travaillant dans l'ensemble des administrations du pays qui nous ont apporté des éléments de preuve, des documents, des contrats, des vidéos, des témoignages qui nous ont permis d'établir l'existence de 60 crimes de meurtre considérés comme crimes contre l'humanité. Aujourd'hui, la France n'a rien fait pour éviter les massacres dont on parle. La France a continué à fournir des armes. La France a continué à soutenir le régime. La France, aujourd'hui, accueille Macky Sall sans avoir fait une déclaration condamnant les violences en question.
It featured footage that apparently showed Senegalese protesters being killed or seriously injured during the recent unrest in June. Sonko alleges that the violent clashes were part of a generalized and systematic attack on the civilian population.
Oui, c'est l'institution qui seraient en mesure de les empêcher de venir faire leurs courses dans le 8e arrondissement, de venir se faire soigner dans l'Union européenne, de venir de façon générale passer leurs vacances ou placer leurs enfants, comme c'est le cas pour Monsieur Moussa Fall, au Canada. Ces gens, aujourd'hui, ont une partie de leur famille à l'étranger, dans ces territoires qui sont membres de la CPI. Et c'est pour ça, c'est très important pour nous d'activer ces juridictions, parce qu'ils ont aujourd'hui le contrôle sur les juridictions nationales.
President Macky Sall called the legal complaint ridiculous. Yoro Dia, one of the president's advisors, said that Sonko's approach is the antithesis of our democratic culture and traditions.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Vietnamese President Vo Van Thiong meet to strengthen cooperation against North Korea's nuclear threat and boost economic ties. The summit concluded with the signing of 17 agreements and documents.
북한의 핵 미사일은 영내의 가장 시급한 안보 위협입니다. 국제사회의 단합된 대응을 견인하기 위해 한국과 베트남은 아세안 및 양자 차원 모두에서 공조를 강화할 것입니다.
This includes cooperation in rare earth elements, free trade, and educational exchanges. President Yoon also pledges $4 billion in soft loans to be given by 2030. He states that both countries will coordinate to draw a united response from the international community to address North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. President Thuong declares that Vietnam is ready to contribute to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
양국은 외교 안보 분야에서의 전략적 협력을 강화하기로 하였습니다. 지난 3월 양국 국방장관 회담 정례화에 합의한 데 이어 이번에 양국 외교장관 회담도 연례화하여 전략적 소통을 심화하기로 하였습니다.
Russia rejects Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's statement that Moscow is planning a terrorist attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Zelensky earlier claimed that Russia's attack will include a release of radiation from the nuclear plant. Ukraine also alleged the cooling pond of the plant was rigged with explosives. But Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov insists Zelensky was lying. He also asserts that Russia is consistently cooperating with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. He says the IAEA has given a very high assessment of the situation at the facility. Concerns over Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant emerged after the destruction of Novokavkovka Dam earlier this month. But IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi supports Russia's statements and denies the claims made by Ukraine. Grossi says no mines or explosions were observed at the cooling pond. Instead, he explains the mines were placed outside the plant's perimeter, but only for defensive purposes.
Moscow court rejects appeal to extend the detention of journalist Evan Gershkovich ahead of his trial on espionage charges. U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy said that the U.S. government maintains their opinion that the charges against Gershkovich are baseless. Tracy said that they were disappointed by the denial of his appeal. Court documents remain confidential as Russian authorities claim that due to the sensitive nature of the espionage charges, the trial is being held privately. They had denied 3 consular visits to Gershkovich, partially due to a visa disagreement involving Russian journalists and the United States.
The international meeting turned into a pledging conference when foreign donors pledged 60 billion euros or $66 billion in financial support for Ukraine. The United Kingdom's Foreign Minister James Cleverly highlighted the importance of Ukraine's economic stability by maximizing the potential of the private sector.
We had not envisaged this to be a pledging conference. Nevertheless, Today at this conference, we can total an announcement of a combined 60 billion euros in support to Ukraine. And therefore, I particularly welcome the EU's announcement of 50 billion euros worth of EU budget support for Ukraine over the next 3 years.
500 companies from 42 countries have pledged their support. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal expressed gratitude for the financial backing. He states that Ukraine will not wait for the end of the war and that they will start to rebuild this year. Shmyhal called for a compensation mechanism to be established to use frozen Russian assets to aid in the country's reconstruction.
One of the key messages I would like to reiterate is that we are starting to rebuild Ukraine this year. We are not waiting for the end of the war. We have the absolute support of the pro-Ukrainian coalition in that idea.
The World Bank estimates a total of $14 billion for critical and priority reconstruction in 2023. They further estimate $411 billion for the total reconstruction of the country.
We are much closer to fully mobilizing the $14.1 billion. We need to implement the 5 rapid recovery priorities. This is what we are focusing on now because these are very practical things.
The leaders of Serbia and Kosovo failed to agree on ways to ease tensions at talks with the European Union in Brussels. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Kosovo's Premier Albin Kurti were summoned for crisis management meetings. This after the EU and United States demanded the two sides calm the situation. The two leaders did not meet face-to-face and instead held separate talks with the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell. The latest flare-up between the two sides occurred after weeks of tension over disputed elections in a Serb-majority northern Kosovo. Tensions worsened after police in Serbia arrested 3 Kosovo policemen, saying they had crossed the border between the two countries. Borrell called on Serbia to release the 3 Kosovo police officers. Borrell said he would consult with EU foreign ministers at a meeting on Monday about the bloc's next steps.
French President Emmanuel Macron has opened the summit for a new global financial pact in Paris. His endeavor seeks to find solutions to immediate global goals like rising poverty, curbing carbon emissions, and protecting nature. In his opening remarks, Macron told delegates that the world needs a public finance shock. Macron said that the world should act urgently to change the operational model of the global financial system. The Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, called the global financial architecture framework outdated. He stated that it has failed to provide a safety net for emerging economies in developing countries.
Nous devons assumer un choc de financement public. Face à ces défis, pauvreté, climat et biodiversité en même temps, on doit investir beaucoup plus. Et nous ne sommes pas au rendez-vous. Et donc ce choc concessionnel doit impliquer davantage de mobilisation nationale, celui d'organisations régionales et de nos structures financières, mais également une meilleure mobilisation des institutions multilatérales. Et je veux saluer ce qu'il faudrait faire en matière de transition climatique.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley said that swift action is required to uplift the interests of emerging countries and the planet as a whole. She went on to urge world leaders to join hands to reform the global financial system for a better future.
Je ne pense pas qu'on arrivera à changer totalement de système, parce que je sais que c'est l'aspiration de certains, mais je pense qu'on peut le faire beaucoup mieux fonctionner si cet argent et ces liquidités sont au service des progrès de la planète et de ce double défi que j'évoquais, pauvreté et climat-biodiversité. Et donc pour cela, nous avons besoin de mobiliser beaucoup plus de financement privé vers les pays en développement, les pays à revenus intermédiaires, les grands émergents. Et aujourd'hui, le secteur privé n'est pas tout à fait au rendez-vous.
The World Bank chief is set to announce multiple measures to aid countries hit by national disasters, among which are a pause in debt collections by multilateral financing bodies globally. Multiple leaders, namely European Council President Charles Michel, China's Prime Minister, Brazil's President, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and a couple of leaders from Africa were all joined by international organizations at a working dinner in the LSE Palace. These measures aim to boost crisis financing in low-income countries and reform post-war financial systems to be able to free up funds to tackle climate change. Leaders are set to back a push for multilateral development banks like the World Bank to put more capital at risk to boost lending. While the new World Bank measures are designed to give developing nations some financial breathing space, there was no discussion of multilateral lenders offering debt write-offs. China, the world's largest bilateral creditor, has been pushing for lenders like the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund to absorb some of the losses. Most Western nations, primarily backed by the United States, have shown their resistance to such measures, arguing that the World Bank might as well be giving Beijing a bailout. Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang is due to speak at the summit to address those remarks.
Addressing both chambers of the U.S. Congress, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly alludes to U.S. concerns about China. He says the dark clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific. Modi adds the stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of the U.S.-India partnership. This happened because he backs a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. In his speech, Modi also defends democracy. He says the U.S. is the oldest and India the largest democracy.
We are not only growing bigger, but we are also growing faster. When India grows, the whole world grows.
Biden and Modi say that the two democracy partnerships would define the next century. This as Washington eyes a counterweight to China and brushes off allegations of growing authoritarianism in New Delhi. U.S. and India reached major deals on engines for fighter jets, semiconductor investment, and space cooperation as Biden rolled out the red carpet to Modi for only the third state visit of his presidency.
After angering China with his remarks that its leader is a dictator, U.S. President Joe Biden says he still hopes to cross paths with President Xi Jinping sooner than later. Kristen Fergata has the details.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he still expects to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in the near future. This after he angered China by referring to its leader as a dictator.
We had an incident that caused some confusion, you might say. But the Secretary Blinken had a great trip to China. I expect to be meeting with President Xi sometime in the future, in the near term, and I don't think it's had any real consequence.
Earlier this week at a fundraiser in California, President Joe Biden says China's Xi Jinping was very embarrassed when a suspected Chinese spy balloon was blown off course over U.S. airspace early this year. Biden says the reason why Xi got very upset was because he didn't know it was there. Biden then says not knowing is a great embarrassment for dictators. Biden's comments come a day after State Secretary of State Antony Blinken completed a visit to China aimed at stabilizing relations. During the visit, Blinken had said that chapter should be closed. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning calls Biden's remarks an open political provocation. Kristen Fergata for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The head of the World Health Organization says he's concerned about the state of healthcare in war-torn Sudan. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says healthcare facilities have been targeted by the warring generals.
About 2/3 of health facilities in affected areas are out of service. Repeated attacks on health facilities, medical warehouses, ambulances, and health workers are preventing patients and health workers from reaching hospitals. WHO has verified 46 attacks on healthcare since the start of the fighting.
Tedros says about 11 million people in the country need health services.
There are significant challenges in controlling ongoing epidemics of measles, malaria, and dengue in Sudan. The risk of epidemics will only increase given the upcoming rainy season. Limited access to safe water, population displacement, and limited capacity to detect outbreaks early.
Fighting resumed just minutes after the latest U.S. and Saudi brokered ceasefire expired on Wednesday. Up next, passengers of Titanic submersible presumed dead. Ecuadorian authorities investigate hanged inmates. And young climate activists call for an end to oil exploitation. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break. Don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders.
Kung ikaw ay isang estudyante o magulang na may anak na nais makakuha ng edukasyon sa ibang bansa, this episode is for you. In our latest edition, we will explore the possibilities of studying abroad, how to get to prestigious universities, and discuss the advantages of pursuing higher education overseas. To give us the course on studying abroad and running a visa services company, Mr. Ryan Santamaria Everest, founder and CEO of Las Islas Filipinas Education Services, join us as his company from Melbourne to different parts of the Philippines is now open for business.
It's an investment for yourself and your family. Everyone needs to update their skills, their knowledge.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Some disappointing news for the United States education system. The latest scores for reading and math among 13-year-old students are in, and they are not good. Philip Toledo tells us more.
The most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, long-term scores for 13-year-old students has been released. They reveal an average 4-point decline in reading and a 9-point decline in mathematics for the school year 2022 to 2023. This compared to the previous assessment administered during the 2019 to 2020 school year. According to the nation's report card, compared to a decade ago, the average scores declined 7 points in reading and 14 points in mathematics. The study sample was of 8,700 13-year-olds. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona says the 11-year decline would not be easy to reverse. It would take years of effort and investment. Cardona, however, mentions the country's commitment to raise the bar for the academic achievement of students in America. He says schools have committed nearly 60% of their American Rescue Plan funds to address lost learning time and accelerate academic recovery. He cites the need to hire more teachers, counselors, and support staff. He also emphasizes the importance of tutoring, one-on-one support to students, and high-quality after-school and summer learning programs. In Atlanta, Georgia, Philip Toledo from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
In Ontario, Canada, hundreds of thousands of renters are facing what may be considered inevitable across the globe these days, the rising cost of housing. Joshua Santillana reports.
How much is it to rent here in Ontario? And how many are actually renting?
The Canadian Rental Housing Index has released some key rental housing data this week that shed light into one of the serious issues in the province. According to the index, the average monthly rent and utilities in Ontario is $1,406, and that the province is home to about 1.7 million renters. The Greater Toronto Area shows the biggest spike in rental prices. In Toronto, 40% of the residents spend more than 30% of their income on rent alone. Spending this much on rent is classified as unaffordable, according to housing experts. Across Canada, rental price average hit $2,000 per month last year. With 1.7 million renters spending a significant amount of their income in rent, coupled with inflation and rising rental prices in the province, it is not a surprise that there is a higher risk of some people being pushed out of the city or becoming homeless. In Toronto, Ontario, Joshua Santayana for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
4 people are dead and another 10 injured after a tornado ripped through the tiny Texas town of Matador. As well as strong winds, the storm brought hail the size of softballs to the region, causing extensive damage to the town of about 570 people. Jessica Bautista reports.
Rescue crews and first responders from several communities converged on Matador Wednesday night to help people deal with the destruction. This is what the scene looked like last night as crews worked through the night searching for victims and survivors. Buildings and homes lay in ruins after the twister ravaged the town. According to news reports, the tornado destroyed 15 structures, including the town's only cafe and convenience stores. It knocked out power and water utilities for townspeople. The strong winds also cut electricity in a wide region of northern Texas and Oklahoma, leaving nearly 500,000 businesses and homes in the dark. Crews are working to restore power, but it could be today, Friday, or tomorrow before the lights are back on. And that will leave tens of thousands of people sweltering in temperatures of 38 degrees or more as they try to make do without air conditioning. Jessica Bautista for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
A tragic ending to an extreme adventure by 5 people in a submersible on their way to view the wreckage of the Titanic. A catastrophic implosion is believed to have destroyed the OceanGate Titan submersible, instantly killing all 5 on board. Thomas Eyelikeness reports.
The vessel lost communication with its mothership on Sunday, about an hour and 45 minutes after it began its 4-kilometer descent to the ocean floor where the Titanic lies. Since then, a massive search has been underway for the Titan. That ended Thursday afternoon, when a remotely operated vehicle found debris from the submersible about 500 meters from the wreckage of the Titanic. Several news agencies are reporting that the U.S. Navy on Sunday detected sounds consistent with an implosion. The Navy gave that information to the search and rescue mission, which continued looking for the submersible. Water pressure where the Titanic lies is about 6,000 pounds per square inch. That's more than 400 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. Any defect in the hull of the submersible would cause it to implode in milliseconds. Death for the occupants would be instantaneous. Of the 5 crew members on board, 3 had paid $250,000 to go on the journey. They included British billionaire Hamish Harding, Pakistani business tycoon Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Suleiman, and French Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet. OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush piloted the submersible. A U.S. Coast Guard spokesman says they don't know yet whether it will be possible to recover the remains of the 5. Thomas Eyelikeness from Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Australian government has given Twitter 28 days to clean up its act. E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant is threatening to fine the social media platform for failing to tackle online abuse. Emmy Capilita Roja has more details.
Inman Grant says unless Twitter shows it is serious about tackling the online hate problem, it will face fines of up to 700,000 Australian dollars. That's more than 26 million pesos for every day that it misses the deadline. Inman Grant points the finger at Elon Musk, saying he's responsible for the problem.
Well, a third of all reports into our Office of Online Hate are coming from Twitter. It's been a huge surge since October 22 when Elon Musk took over. And of course, there have been a confluence of factors that have added to this. You know, Twitter's always been fiery in terms of discourse, but it's turned into an absolute bin fire.
She says Musk has made huge staff cuts. Inman Grant says she wrote to Musk last November, saying she feared that cuts would leave the company unable to meet Australian laws. Inman Grant is a former Twitter employee who worked on cyber safety. Emi Capilita Roja for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Turkish citizens received a big economic shock Thursday when the country's central bank nearly doubled interest rates. The bank hiked the rate from 8.5% to 15%, the first increase since March of 2021. Julian Bukayan has more.
The recent rate hike in Turkey reverses the unorthodox economic policies of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan had been keeping rates low, believing that would tame inflation. But inflation in Turkey still runs around 40%. Thursday's increase is lower than market expectations. Many economists thought that the bank would push rates up as high as 20%. The central bank hints that more increases are on the way. It says monetary tightening will continue in a timely and gradual manner until inflation is brought under control. Fitch Ratings says the benchmark rate could reach 25% by the end of the year. Traditional economic theory says higher rates reduce the money supply and ultimately reduces inflation. Economists say Erdogan's unconventional belief has exacerbated financial turmoil in the country. They say that has led to a currency and cost of living crisis, with many people not able to afford the basic necessities. Julian Bukayan from Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Central American country of Honduras is putting all of its prisons under the control of the military. The move follows a bloody massacre this week at a women's prison that left 46 inmates dead. Myla Simbulan has more details.
The military will take over the country's 21 prisons on July 1st for a period of 1 year. Honduran President Xiomara Castro says during that time, it must recruit, train, and educate at least 2,000 new prison guards. Castro did not announce any plan to improve prison conditions. Prisons in the country are overcrowded. Facilities have deteriorated. Guards are poorly trained and security is lax. Many people want an international investigation into prisons. The violence broke out Tuesday when the Barrio 18 gang stormed a wing of the prison that housed the rival Mara Salvatrucha group. Gang members locked the women in cells, shot them, and then set fire to the unit. Most of the victims died in the blaze. Authorities are still trying to identify the remains of some of the victims. They need genetic testing or dental records because the bodies are so badly burned. Myla Simbulan for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
A body found in early June in a clandestine grave at a military facility near Uruguay's capital, Montevideo, was that of a woman. This, according to a forensic anthropologist leading the excavation in search of people forcibly disappeared during the 1973 to 1985 dictatorship. Carlo Valdez reports.
Coordinator of the Forensic Anthropology Research Group of Uruguay, Alicia Luciardo, says what they discovered in June is a female skeleton. The burial was found on June 6 in Battalion 14 in Toledo, Canelones, some 25 kilometers north of Montevideo. The site was an army unit that functioned as a detention and torture center during the civic military regime. Luciardo says no clothing associated with the remains or any personal effects were found. But she says the skeleton is essentially complete. She says sex could be determined by visual and metric characteristics, but not age nor height, due to the damage suffered by some bones. Luciardo explains that the body was buried in a pit dug into the rock. Lime was placed below and on top of the corpse. It was then covered with a slab. She says lime preserved the genetic material very well. thus a good chance of recovering the DNA. The bodies of 5 of Uruguay's 197 enforced disappearance victims previously discovered were all male. Carlo Valdez from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Prison authorities in Ecuador are investigating after guards discovered 3 inmates hanged. They made the discovery Wednesday during a head court at the Riobamba prison. Joanne Soriano has the details.
The prosecutor's office says the bodies have been identified and are now in the morgue awaiting autopsies. Earlier in the day, guards had confiscated firearms, drugs, alcohol, and knives. There is no indication as to whether the 3 dead prisoners belonged to any criminal groups. Ecuadorian prisons have been a hotbed of violence. Since 2021, more than 420 prisoners have died in vicious fighting between rival gangs. According to 2022 statistics, there are about 31,000 inmates in Ecuador, being housed in 36 overcrowded prisons. Joanne Soriano from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
On the sidelines of the Paris summit for a new financial pact, young environmental activists from around the world meet at the Théâtre du Châtelet. Their aim is to talk about climate change and the risks faced by climate activists around the world. The young climate activists are calling for an end to oil exploitation. They demand that rich countries responsible for climate deregulation pay what they owe to poor countries instead of exploiting them.
We are paying with our lives because of the climate impacts and disasters that we are experiencing. Polluters must pay, but instead, who is paying? We are. We are paying through the overexploitation of our people and our resources, through cheap labor and through exploitation of our natural lands.
Coming right up. Meta to end news access in Canada after an approved media bill. The San Antonio Spurs get Victor Wembanyama as the #1 pick in the 2023 NBA draft. And Liverpool gets by with a little help from the Beatles. Catch more news in business, tech, sports, and entertainment when we return.
Meta announced it would block access to news on Facebook and Instagram for all users in Canada after Ottawa passed a bill requiring digital giants to pay publishers for content. The Senate Upper Chamber approved Bill C-18, or the Online News Act. The law will take effect 6 months after it gets royal assent from the Governor General. The legislation was proposed after complaints from Canada's media industry to regulate tech companies. Some also argued Facebook and Instagram are allegedly taking profits from traditional news organizations while using their content for free. But Meta insisted news has no economic value to the company and that its users do not use the platform for news. Google, another critic of the Online News Act, earlier said they are considering following Meta's actions. The first ever Olympic organized esports week kicked off in Singapore on Tuesday. The Olympic Esports Series is a global virtual and simulated sports competition created by the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, and in collaboration with international federations and game publishers. It features 10 simulated sports, including archery, baseball, chess, and taekwondo. They ruled out the inclusion of first-person shooter games as the promotion of violence goes against Olympic values. Visitors can wear headsets and spar with animated opponents in virtual taekwondo, while others tried out a dancing game and a racing simulation. The IOC officially recognized esports as a sport in 2017, but is currently no plan to include video games in the Olympic program. It will culminate live in an in-person final at the first ever Olympic Esports Week from June 22 to 25, 2023 in Singapore.
The 2023 NBA draft is done, and Victor Wembanyama has been picked number 1.
With the first pick in the 2023 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Victor Wembanyama from Nanterre, France.
France's Victor Wembanyama is officially a San Antonio Spur as the French phenom joined the NBA on Thursday as the first pick of the NBA draft. After years of anticipation, the Spurs selected the 7'4" center, who is expected to lead San Antonio from the lottery back to NBA prominence. Wembanyama is widely regarded as a generational talent who arrives in the NBA as the most coveted number 1 pick since LeBron James entered the league in 2003. He also follows the footsteps in San Antonio of fellow number 1 overall picks David Robinson and Tim Duncan, who went on to Hall of Fame careers while combining to lead the Spurs to 5 NBA championships. Kenyan President William Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua led the 70th Safari Rally WRC, or World Rally Championship kickoff. Accompanied by Sports Cabinet Secretary Ababu Namwamba, Ruto visited the rally service park before strapping himself into the co-driver's seat of Pierre-Louis Loub's M Sport Ford Puma Rally 1 Hybrid. After the race, the president said that he had a good experience. Gachagua, meanwhile, said that sporting activities are great contributors to the nation's socio-economic development. He added that the Safari Rally WRC has been a nostalgic and historic sport in Kenya. The Safari Rally was first held in 1953 as the East African Coronation Safari in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanganyika as a celebration of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. It was renamed in 1960 as the East African Safari Rally and kept that name until 1974 when it became the Kenya Safari Rally. Held on roads, it became notorious as the toughest round of the WRC. Tough conditions like changing weather and more than 5,000 competitive kilometers made simply finishing an achievement. After years of industrial decline, Liverpool's economy is getting a little help from its most famous band, the Beatles. From United Kingdom, Catherine Messina reports.
It was once a thriving maritime hub, including for the transatlantic slave trade, But after years of industrial decline, Liverpool's economy is getting a boost from its most famous sons. The red brick property located at 24th Lynn Road belonged to Paul McCartney before becoming one of the Fab Four, along with John Lennon, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, which is now run by the National Trust. Like other towns and cities across the UK, Liverpool, a port city in northwest England, is facing a cost of living crisis. Its economy is based on football and the Beatles, said marketing manager Victoria McDermott of the Cavern Club. The city, which last month hosted the Eurovision Song Contest on behalf of 2022 winners Ukraine, is home to English Premier League football clubs Liverpool and Everton. Tourists found viewing McCartney's former home as part of the Magical Mystery Tour, the title of a Beatles song and a surreal 1967 film, very emotional. It was 6 decades ago, but Beatlemania lives on in Liverpool, where statues of the Fab Four can be found around the city. 2 museums are also dedicated to the band, along with countless restaurants, bars and souvenir shops, paying homage and generating large sums for the local economy. Almost half of Liverpool's business tax revenue comes from tourism, according to local councillor Harry Doyle. Local government data shows Beatles-related tourism is worth about £120 million per year and supports some 2,500 jobs. The rebuilt Cavern Club, meanwhile, welcomes 800,000 fans out of 22 million visitors annually, said McDermott. And it's incredibly important that we look after this musical heritage. This is Catherine Messina from London, United Kingdom for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Now that it's the weekend again, you can relax with a trip to the movie theaters. Stephanie Mayo has her pick of what to watch.
DC fans will surely enjoy this, but for the regular moviegoer, well, it is still worth the watch. Still showing in theaters near you. Stephanie Mayo for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Okay, something to watch over the weekend because it's Friday.
Happy weekend.
And to end the week, here's a quote from Pritzker Prize winner, Chinese-American architect of the Louvre, I.M. Pei. Form doesn't always follow function. Form has a life of its own, and at times it may be the motivating force in design.
That's really interesting. I think that doesn't just apply to art, but in sports as well, even in pageants, right?
And it's very prevalent nowadays. People are very visual, not gonna lie.
Very, very visual. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.